25 years ago, the Peacekeeping and Stability Operations Institute, PKSOI, was created at the U.S. Army War College to address challenges from peacekeeping and stability operations. Over the years, PKSOI's mission transformed to address emerging complex asymmetric gray area conflicts, exemplified by the mixture of political, economic, social, religious, informational, and military dynamics in a space filled by non-governmental organizations, international and regional organizations, empowered individuals, radical groups, and contending major powers.
I actually created PKSOI, and I am proud of it. And the Army, we didn't know anything about these NGOs. We hardly knew anything about what we were trying to do, and we needed to learn more, and we needed to get along with the UN. And we needed to be close to the UN so that I could say, we are in the game. And Carlisle gave me substance, a substantive way to be in the game. And the game was known as stability ops.
Over the past 25 years, PKSOI has gotten the Army and the DoD in the game. It built the current foundations for Army and Joint Force peace and stabilization doctrine, established the baseline for education and training for the force, built an accessible stabilization lessons learned system that collected, analyzed, and disseminated lessons from Haiti and the Balkans to Afghanistan and Iraq, developed cutting-edge concepts for the protection of civilians, mass atrocity prevention and response, transitional public security, women, peace and security, and stabilization in multi-domain operations. As the joint proponent for the Secretary of the Army, on behalf of the Secretary of Defense, PKSOI led and supervised a DoD-wide analysis and problem-solving exercise that addressed key shortfalls for the Joint Force, known as the Joint Requirements Oversight Council Memorandum 12. As the joint proponent and a leader of interagency collaboration, PKSOI assembled a group of noted subject matter experts in all of the key stability sectors: security, economics and infrastructure, rule of law and policing, security assistance, foreign humanitarian assistance, and social well-being and governance, in addition to the expertise in United Nations peace operations, women, peace and security, protection of civilians, and mass atrocity response. PKSOI also retains the services of senior Foreign Service officers from state and USAID, and visiting professors from academia and non-governmental organizations that form a civil-military team approach. What has been PKSOI's impact?
This is an area, and in my conversation with General Sullivan over the years, here at AUSA and before, when we were both on active duty, was the need for some organization or some group of experts to focus on operations other than war that the United States Army constantly finds itself involved in. As we've all experienced, we see the U.S. Army as a war-fighting organization, but major wars come along very infrequently in the history of our nation, whereas other military operations are ongoing every day, operations other than war. And those, while we as warfighters say we do not want to do those functions, no one else can do it except the U.S. Army. So the U.S. Army has been asked to do these functions throughout its history, and we need a group of professionals who can focus on this while the rest of the Army is focusing on the warfighting tasks. It has had a huge impact on operations in the field. It is a body, a think tank, a thought leader on issues that most operational commanders are not focused on. In other words, the Institute focuses on things outside of the direct combat role of our Army. And I think in many ways assists commanders in thinking through those particular operations, whether it's post-combat operations, peacekeeping operations, or other stability operations.
I think the biggest impact is that PKSOI is the place in which you can have a dialogue with a whole cast of characters. It's why you talk about a whole of government, whole of society approach, PKSOI is the place that can occur. That's the norm, that's routine. We worked hard on that. We worked hard to get in and bring in the right military folks, but also bring in the State Department rep, bring in the Navy rep, bring in an NGO rep, bring in international partners. Our ability to bring the UN down and work with them. So when you come to most PKSOI functions, you have a whole of government and a whole of society audience, and they're working together. And I don't know of any organization in the military or the joint force that has the ability to reach across all of those silos and pull it all together. And I think that is the strength of PKSOI, and as a result of that, you've seen things come out like this governing principles for stability for the US government. You've seen different pieces come out about how to deal with stability units for police, how to deal with crime and corruption, how to deal with mass atrocities. Those are whole of government, whole of society doctrine and publications and manuals that come on out, because the audience that we can attract, we can bring them together for very low cost and produce high impact documents that are going out and being used across the practitioner community.
Learning organizations are flexible organizations that can respond to a dynamic world. PKSOI established a groundbreaking lessons learned site called Solemns, which is accessible to the whole of society. For 20 years, Solemns has provided the community key insights from historical perspectives that are applicable to current and future events. It is the repository of blueprints for reestablishing provincial reconstruction teams, human terrain teams, female engagement teams, agricultural support teams, among many others. All organizations designed out of necessity to meet the operational shortfalls in Afghanistan and Iraq.
We just lived through the tragedy in Somalia, the Battle of Mogadishu. And coming out of that, I was asked to do a lessons learned study at the strategic level. What went right, what went wrong. And out of that effort came an effort to kind of codify the lessons in a presidential decision directive, PD 56 at the time. And part of that directive was to have interagency training on how to integrate all of the tools of national power in an integrated Palmer plan and so forth. And PKSOI stepped forward as kind of a home for having those discussions on Palmer planning, and eventually for actually training all of the interagency personnel, DoD, state, the intel community, NSC, Treasury, bringing all those folks together to train people on how to do this integration. That was one of the primary lessons learned from Somalia.
Starting in 1994 with Rwanda and Somalia, PKSOI has hosted and facilitated numerous workshops to extract and share the lessons and develop training. These workshops range across the world from the Balkans to Haiti to Afghanistan and Mali, focusing on key issues from humanitarian response to transitions, corruption, whole of government, informational operations, and rule of law.
And I was selected to be the J5 of the CJIC motive. Yeah, the Coalition Joint Civil Military Operations Task Force. Now, it existed in doctrine, but nobody really knew what this thing was, what it was supposed to do, and importantly, as we were standing it up, and again, I was the J5, who was supposed to be in this thing? So I called Bill Flavin, called PKSOI and said, what's the Manning document? What kind of capabilities do we need to have in this CJIC motive? And terrific. What came back at me was the template for what we needed to build out that very unique organization. And from that organization, we got these things called the CHICLICs, the Coalition Humanitarian Liaison Cells, which then became the PRTs. So it was really instrumental at the beginning of the Afghanistan mission. I really think the direct result of their assistance to the warfighter on the ground, forward, really did lead to this new concept.
As the joint proponent lead for the Army under the direction of the Secretary of Defense, PKSOI has overseen the departmental analysis of stability operations that resulted in new policy, doctrine, training, and education for all of the Department of Defense. For over 13 years, PKSOI has led an annual whole of government workshops on education and training, and is a partner training and education center for NATO. Through the efforts of PKSOI, contemporary concepts and doctrine have emerged for transitional public security, mass atrocity prevention and response, transitions, guidelines for whole-of-government approaches, and frameworks for interacting with NGOs. PKSOI recently collaborated with the Office of Secretary of Defense, State, and USAID, who compiled the seminal document on interagency collaboration, the Stabilization Assessment Review, which set the foundation for new U.S. government policy, specifically Department of Defense Directive 3005.
A recent contribution that they have made at the strategic or interagency policy level was the inputs they provided to the Stabilization Assistance Review. Absolutely critical contributions. It would come from Carlisle to DC and sit with representatives from DoD, the State Department, USAID, in support of, in this case, the State Department, and DoD, of course, to actually build this initial paper, this 3D stabilization paper that became the Stabilization Assistance Review. We'll see where it goes, but it's a terrific foundation, and PKSOI was really important in that.
PKSOI, PKI then, played an incredible role. They served as the belly button into the Department of Defense, which is massive by any standard of any agency. They helped build the capacity for all of us to engage with the military on the ground in very important operations for the United States. They also help link us to our allies, to the United Nations, and to NATO and other organizations across the globe. We simply could not have been effective without the Institute. Just the core fundamentals of, one, gathering lessons from across the globe from our military, to infuse, two, the doctrine that guides the training and education and operations that they engage in, three, to conduct actually the training and education and develop the curricula that our troops need to operate on the ground, and then three, to bring that all back together again and into a constant cycle of infusing the lessons into doctrine, into training, into education, and into operations.
PKSOI has gotten DoD in the game by directly assisting the UN in the field through exercises with doctrine development, lessons learned, as well as participating in international fora like the International Association of the Peace Training Centers and the Challenges Forum. Many countries define their future engagement in terms of peace operations, humanitarian response, and stabilization. PKSOI continues to engage and keep lines of dialogue open in these areas of mutual interest. In such countries as China, India, Russia, Nigeria, Sweden, Pakistan, Egypt, Japan, Jordan, Colombia, Brazil, to mention only a few. PKSOI serves as a driver for initiatives which inform civil affairs, security policing, rule of law, civil-military integration, security sector reform, economic infrastructure and health services development, strategic planning, strategic intelligence and cross-governmental capacity building challenges, as well as enhancing the interoperability of U.S. and foreign military forces. PKSOI sends a strategic signal to the whole of interagency and the U.S. allies that the Army and the Joint Force are in the game. PKSOI is the strategic hedge against future uncertainty and a critical enabler to meet the unknown.
I want to offer heartfelt thanks to all of you, as well as our colleagues in the practitioner and think tank worlds who have worked extremely hard as policy practitioners and thought leaders to advance peace and stability throughout the world. Thank you.